Club, where we talk about the best of what we've read. Today we're covering chapters 9 and 10 in Mark Sisson's Primal Endurance, and this is going to be our last episode on this book, and then we want to do another one. So before we begin here, I don't know what to transition that.
Obviously whenever we're going through these chapters, we always love to include a couple of personal stories to make it a little bit more relevant and how we've seen some of these things play out in our life and the times that we haven't necessarily followed that pattern and kind of how it's been to our detriment. And so we really wanted to start off a story. Start off with a story. Okay, he's not laughing. We wanted to start off with a story that kind of related to what we've read and apply it back. And we were trying to find a way to tell the story that related. It totally doesn't, but it's hilarious. And so we hope you enjoy it and hope you laugh from it as much as we did. So Preston,
yeah, this does not relate to anybody whatsoever. I was just throwing out ideas, trying to make people laugh before we got started. So this story comes from when I was running college from Weber State. And we had traveled out to a race in Washington, in Seattle. And we were at this indoor track meet. And naturally, this being distance runners, this is about another distance runner on that team, and we're going to omit her name. We're going to call her Sally in the story. Sally.
What a great girl.
So Sally she was in her race on the track, and as distance runners do, it's very often to get stomach issues during like a very hard effort or race or something like that. Very common. I'm sure you've seen all the porta potties
I like it.
lining the marathon courses everywhere. So, well, this was the case for Sally in this race. She was on the track, and whether it was bad nutrition before, whatever it ended up being, she ended up not being able to hold it in. And long story short, wasn't a very clean way to finish the race. So after the race, Sally, she hurried off to the bathroom to go and clean up. And she was cleaning her shorts and like just above like the toilet. And she dropped her shorts in the toilet and flushed them down the toilet.
How does that even happen?
I don't know. So I don't know if it was like one of those automatic flushing toilets, right when like you move out of the way it flushes, so they like fell and then it immediately flushed and sent them down.
We see you've made a deposit. Thank you.
Exactly. But anyway, she's like in this big track.
I can't help my hand. I have to flush it.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So. So she's stuck in this bathroom stall, and this is like a big national class track meet. Like there are professionals that come and race here along with the collegians, and so she's stuck in this stall with no pants. She has to call over this other girl in the bathroom and be like, "Hey, I need you to go find some of my teammates. I need to get some help. I need more backup." So, long story short, they found some of her teammates and they were able to help her out and get her some fresh clothes to wear so that she could leave the bathroom. She had a great race, by the way. So there was a happy ending to the story. But there's our very non-relatable story to go along with what we're going to be talking about today.
You said long story shorts. Just
that was on purpose.
Yes.
Oh.
Now that we got the 3-year-olds out of us.
So how we transition that into where we're going, I'll let one of you guys take that away and try to make that transition because I'm
at that point, we'll start talking about chapters 9 and 10.
Great transition. Yes. Love it.
Okay, well, how about, what did you guys like about the chapter? What was something that stood out to you guys?
Yeah, I think it really kind of took everything as a whole, like a lot of the things from each chapter, and just kind of pointed it out again with that emphasis on rest and recovery, and making sure that that's built into not only our training but just the patterns that we keep up every day in our lives. And so just a lot of relevant stuff. Again, I love that it hit on sleep again, because again that's super important. Getting enough rest, being adequately prepared for the next day ahead. I think one of the things that was really interesting to us, hadn't read up on a ton, was kind of some of the stuff on heart rate variability.
Yeah, that really stuck out to me quite a bit. I'd always been like a big fan of, keeping track of your heart rate. Particularly your resting heart rate. Sorry, I'm lost for words a little bit. Still trying to transition a little bit, I guess. And so every morning I would always take my own resting heart rate and kind of use that as a point to my day to see like, is my body well recovered? And obviously, the lower your heart rate, that's more of an indicator that you are recovered. So some days I'll wake up, I'll be 5 beats per minute higher than it was other days. I'll kind of go into that day with an expectation that I may be a little bit more tired. And that's not always the case. There's different things that go along with that. Maybe I didn't sleep well the night before, which is an indicator, but it's not always going to say like, your workout is going to be really bad today. So you can't use it as a tell-all sign. But one of the things that I really liked about this heart rate variability is that it wasn't one single point like taking your resting heart rate. It's the variability of the rate at which your heart is beating over an extended period of time. Lots of people, kind of have this idea that your heart rate is this consistent, metronome, 1 second, 1 second, 1 second, which is actually not. There's a little bit of a change within that based on the different stressors and things going on in your life.
That's awesome. And something that we're talking about is heart rate variability. It's super cool. It's super cool to track the numbers and kind of see where you're at. One thing that we brought up was different mindsets. So heart rate variability might be good for one person, not good for another person. Because for me, I know that if I were to keep track of it, I get obsessed over numbers. And I even asked my husband, like, when I first started keeping track of my resting heart rate, like, there were nights where I couldn't sleep because I was like, why is it 3 beats higher? Like, I get obsessed and it gives me anxiety. So for me personally, heart rate variability wouldn't work because I would just become obsessed with the numbers and I would become less focused on just paying attention to my body and tuning in to how I'm feeling and what I need based off of how I'm feeling. But I know you mentioned you love the numbers. And that's
I do. I really like that kind of stuff. And I want to get kind of clear that no one technique should ever be your sole focus. It should be kind of like a measurement of everything together. So how your body feels, the numbers that you're seeing, really just like any of those indicators, it's going to be really best used when used together. But I like the heart rate variability and those numbers in particular, just for the fact that, it kind of gives you cues of whether you're overtraining or whether you can still push a little bit harder as an elite athlete and as someone that is really focused on performance and wanting to get faster and stronger. It's all about kind of riding that line. You don't want to cross it to the point where you're going to be overtraining and not recovering properly. But at the same time, you want to be as close as you can. So, you're pushing your limits, you're getting stronger, you're getting faster. And so if you kind of have a rough idea of, your average heart rate variability or your average resting heart rate, you can use those as cues to be able to know if, that workout that day should be a rest day and be taken a little bit easier or even completely taken off completely, or whether, you kind of have the green light to, okay, let's do like a hard workout today. Let's go fast. Let's lift heavy.
Yeah. So I actually really like that. I like the stoplight analogy, right? I think that's applicable in a lot of areas, right? Like, okay, I have a green light to go, right? I'm well rested. Here's what my heart rate's looking like. I've gotten the proper nutrition. And then maybe that yellow light, okay, I've had, this stressor added to my life lately. I haven't been sleeping well. Like, maybe I'm going to back up on the training versus red light. Like, okay, it's just too much. Like, I need a rest day. I need a break. I think kind of delineating along those lines can be helpful so that we know when we're trending either direction. So I absolutely love that. And I think too, like you both mentioned, I think it goes back to mindset and how are we approaching our training. Is it a way to be going after performance and some of those metrics in a healthy way? Or is it, I've got to be better than this, I've got to be better than this, and I've got to beat everyone else, and I've got to be at the top of the game always, right? And this kind of overstressed, over anxious, like, have to versus like, this is what I enjoy, this is beneficial for me, and like, I'm growing along with accomplishing my goals.
Mm-hmm. And I really liked your analogy of it. like when someone's trying to lose weight, maybe one person likes to hop on the scale and see their weight, and that's helpful for them, versus another person who they never hop on the scale, and it's more helpful for them to just never see that number. So heart rate variability can be very useful in a lot of ways. It just depends on your mindset, and you decide if that's something that will work for you or not.
A lot of the content in this chapter as well kind of talked about how we can get that heart rate variability to be in an ideal state. So things to talk about like recovery with like cold ice therapy, compression, hydration, movement throughout the day, sleeping well. And so I think it would be useful to kind of go through a few of those different things and kind of our experience using each one. Mark, do you have like any particular ones that you found to be beneficial in your training and things?
I think just what I think would be really beneficial to dive in first before we even go into those things is he talked about that idea of RICE, right? The rest, ice, compression, elevation. That's a really common acronym. That's still what most doctors are prescribing, right? Do this. And Mark brought it up in a little bit different way. The acronym that I like that's been in use more recently is POLICE. So his first is protect, right? We have an injury with something, we want to protect it for that first little bit, right? But then after that, optimal loading, right? So we're not just totally, okay, I'm just never gonna get on the track again until things feel completely better, right? It's we're adding load little bit by little bit in a safe and a controlled way so that we're getting movement throughout that joint. And I think that's kind of been an underlying idea of so much of what Marxism talks about is getting that movement, regular movement in so many different forms. And then with that, adding in some of those things like ice, compression, elevation to reduce pain and to help that process along. And so I don't know, that's kind of my thoughts on the thing. That's something that I wanted to get out of the way because I think too often, like injury, stop doing the thing. And while it's important to rest, too much rest ends up being counterproductive in terms of recovering from injuries.
Absolutely. I really like the acronym. I've never heard it before. The acronym that Mark Sisson gives us in the book is ECM, elevate, compression, and movement, which is kind of along the same lines. And it really does come down to movement. And ice is a great thing. It is more of a psychological kind of thing where it does feel good, it numbs the pain. But the most important thing is that we're moving. A lot of people, like you said, will get an injury, put their foot, put some ice on it, and kind of wait for the ice to heal it. But that's not going to work. You got to move it. One of our partners told us, or gave us an example of when he sprained, or it was just a sprained ankle, right?
Yeah.
He sprained his ankle and he said it was so bad he was bruised all the way up to his shins. And he said right after he sprained his ankle, he went and played volleyball for 4 hours.
That's so Cameron.
Right, that's really his style. But he said it helped and his injury went away really quickly because he just moved it. He said another thing that he does when he sprains his ankles is he puts ice on his ankles and then he wraps an ace bandage around it super, super tight. And he said while it's icing, he keeps his ankle pumping the entire time. He never just lets it sit.
Yeah. And one of the points that he continued to elaborate on with that was using ice and ibuprofen, things like that, to manage the pain as opposed to managing the injury itself.
Yeah.
Because essentially, like Melody was saying, the movement and those other modalities that we're going to get into that Mark Sisson had the ECM acronym for are going to ultimately do the biggest benefit when it comes to healing. But the ice and the ibuprofen, things like that, it's going to manage the pain. And so if you can't get out and move and keep moving those injured areas, then using the ice, using the ibuprofen, if that's going to allow you to keep moving, then that's great. I would say, jump into that, do it a little bit, but don't overdo it. Use it as kind of a guide to be able to keep you moving. And if you don't need it, then don't use it. Your best bet is going to be just getting out and moving. Because when you're using ice and ibuprofen, you're limiting the amount of white blood cells that are going to be able to get there and be able to jumpstart that recovery and those injuries.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I really like what you said though, is you can use that as a guide, don't overdo it. And so that's something we want to be clear on, that it's not saying like, okay, you injured yourself, I want you to just go off on a 20-mile run and just like pound that thing, or go play some, go play some rugby, or go, those things, right? That's not what we're saying. We're not saying that getting out of pain is a pass to go and then like overload the tissue again. But just as a way to introduce some of that gentle movement, increasing, over the next few days, and really jump-starting that healing process and letting it run its course in the most optimal way.
Right, and that's why I like that police acronym. It's optimal loading.
Every step you take.
Exactly. Another thing to mention is ice doesn't get rid of the swelling, it just slows down getting more swelling, versus movement actually does get rid of swelling. That muscle pump will get rid of it. So
something that was interesting is that he's like, eat an hour after you work out, but in the nutrition chapter he said, see how long you can go without eating anything.
Really?
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. Kind of contrasting writing there.
Well, it's interesting. Some of the stuff I don't. Well, I guess it depends on what kind of training you're doing, because like one, you need to like get back up those glycogen stores, and your body's in a better state post-exercise to like take those in without it like being converted to fat. Like it's more likely to just be used for energy and go into building those glycogen stores, as well as like I don't know. There's different sayings on like the post-anabolic window, right? Post-exercise, like how long that is and how soon within that you need to eat. But anyway, that's an aside. But
just do what works for you.
So one of the things you mentioned in telling the story about Cameron was that idea of doing the ACE wrap, right? Introducing some sort of compression. And there's definitely a ton of different ways that can be done, right? ACE wrap is one. I know one thing that we like to use here, I know Preston's gotten a ton of use out of them, is the compression boots, kind of offering that intermittent compression to help speed along the what's happening in the lymphatic system and get some of that swelling, that extra stuff out of those areas.
So it gets rid of swelling.
Yeah.
Compression and movement gets rid of swelling, whereas ice just slows it down.
Yeah. And I think that compression can also just have like a psychological benefit. Like it just feels good, right? And I don't think that effect can be discounted when we're talking about recovery. The things that we, that feel good to us and that we think will be helpful often can be helpful to a certain extent. And so, love compression. Same thing, like I know that, for some people, being able to relax and kind of calm that mindset down and get back into a more rested state is some sort of massage after they've done a workout, whether that be like going out and getting a massage, whether that be some self-myofascial release. I know that like one thing that you've talked about is using those awesome looking guns.
Yeah, I love those
The
things.
Theraguns?
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
I use mine multiple times every day. I love it. And like you said, a lot of that stuff, it is kind of psychological. And so if we, say something about any of these modalities and you just feel like, oh, like that really helped me though, like don't stop doing that. I think it kind of comes case by case, and sometimes not always the research and the, what's out there really reflects what it's doing for your body individually. Because, some will say that, massage even doesn't have a lot of place to be able to manipulate the actual muscle fibers and soft tissue there. Would take so much force and so much time that, some of those things are really a lot of big change in. But for me personally, like I absolutely love that, especially with like those Theraguns and things. I feel like I'm able to, if anything, just be able to relax and have a set plan that I follow after every workout to be able to bring that heart rate back down and be able to bring down my core body temperature, things like that.
Yeah, I
That's
love
awesome.
that.
But what about the science behind it? Maybe you could explain this a little better. One of our partners was teaching this to us before we came down. He was saying that swelling is what causes pain, and through massage and other manual modalities, you can move that fluid around and decrease the swelling, and that's going to help the pain.
Yeah, so I mean, there's definitely a bunch of different theories around what's happening. So that one of those ideas is that, like in massage and some of the manual therapy, right, we're just moving, essentially like moving fluid around, especially in the case of swelling, helping move that, some of that out of there. But I think what we see as far as manual therapy, and we'll see what what kind of response we get from this. Again, our idea isn't to hate on any of these modalities. Kind of like Preston said, it's a case by case basis. But so much of what we get through many of these modalities is kind of a neurophysiological modulation. Isn't that a fun word to throw around? But the idea of giving that like it's not so much this is changing things at a tissue level, but it's having some effects on our nervous system that can maybe decrease tone, decrease pain, different things like that. And I think what we definitely can't discount, again, is like what you brought up is our own belief and other people's beliefs around how those different modalities, how those different therapies can be helpful. Because I think if we just kind of throw a wrench in it and be like, oh no, that doesn't work. The research isn't there, right? We're not going to do that because this is what the research says. I think we do ourselves a disservice, and I think we do the people that we work with a disservice by basically saying what you think and what you felt doesn't matter. And we don't want to say that. Certainly when we're using any of these modalities, when we're performing different things, we want to make sure that none of those things are going to be either acutely or chronically harmful, right? But I think past that point, if that's what works for people, then that's what works for people. And those neurophysiological effects can be very, very powerful and can be very helpful in people, in helping people to, get past the pain or to recover or to do any of those things. And so that's kind of the way that I try to look at things, is using them as adjuncts to healthy movement and other healthy lifestyle behaviors.
I love that. So basically, why tell someone that's wrong if it's not hurting them? If it's working for them, it's working for them, and great. And it also makes me think about, when you get a massage, why do they dim the lights and give you a blanket and put on the soft soothing music?
I like feel more relaxed just thinking about that, right?
I love massage.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, all those things are just gonna kind of bring them back to the heart rate variability. Give you more variability there.
Yeah.
With the massage, when the lights are dim and you're just laying there and completely relaxed, your heart rate is likely going to drop. As opposed to, when you're going about your everyday tasks, it's going to be a little bit higher. It gives you a little more variability there, which in this case, they say that, having a higher variability there is going to be better for you. You don't want it to be more like a metronome. That's generally the case just when you're like working out and doing something really stressful.
Yeah.
So that's a great transition into how sometimes we can become comfortable in this fight or flight mode.
Yeah.
Or sometimes our heart rate is that metronome, and it is that constant high heart rate 24/7 all the time. Something that I could really relate to in the book is he talked about how when you become comfortable in this fight or flight state, you don't realize that you're in that state, and things start to happen. Like, the example he used is you drive into your garage with a bike rack still on top of your car. And I thought about all the times where I'm just feeling frazzled and I lock my keys in the car, or I lock something in my house, or I leave something at a patient's house. And I'm pretty sure we all can relate to times like that where we just are frazzled and we're just letting things like that happen.
No, it's interesting because when we met a couple weeks ago to talk about the chapter on sleep, I said I've been implementing some of those strategies, right? Like I try to have lights off, or no screen time within a couple hours of bedtime, try to dim the lights, going to bed at consistent times, waking up at consistent times, and then just like, trying to spend some peaceful time in the morning. Like I mentioned, I just would go and sit outside for like 10 minutes in the morning and just, hear the breeze blowing and the birds chirp. And I felt like it made a huge difference, right? Like that was really nice and I felt great. But, just with other life stressors and things, it was really easy to fall out of that pattern again, just kind of back to that baseline. So that even like when I adopted those healthy behaviors, I felt better. I recognized the change. It was just so easy to slip back into that kind of more stressed out mode. And so it definitely takes an intentional commitment to make these changes and kind of be okay with being uncomfortable for a while, so that we can be more comfortable in a healthy set point.
I love that. And it's kind of crazy to think that we don't realize we're in this state sometimes until we give ourselves that space to relax and decompress, and all of a sudden you're like, what is this feeling?
It's like not to be stressed out all the time. Yeah, and I would say it's more of a common thing as opposed to being an exception, with how fast paced everyone's days are. With whether you're taking care of a family and working a job and then trying to fit your workout routine in there. And all these different things, we're juggling. I think it's more often than not, people are going to be in this comfortable fight or flight zone. Yeah. And so I think it's important to first just realize that that's where you are. Because you're not going to have any change if you're not paying attention to the fact that you are in that spot. You can't make any difference without taking those steps. And then just taking the time for yourself, doing those things that we've talked about with better sleep and with focusing on recovery and mindfulness and being in the moment, things like that. They're going to help kind of bring you to where you're at right now and realize that, you're not running away from a bear right now. You're not.
Even though it might feel like it.
Yeah, you don't need to feel like you're in a fight or flight mode all the time, because there really is no immediate danger around you. It's kind of your own perception on things going on that makes you feel stressed out and gives you this high heart rate, this low heart rate variability because you're in fight or flight all the time.
One analogy he used that I really liked is he said, imagine that we have a reservoir of cortisol inside of us, and there's a shower nozzle, and it's up to us to decide how much cortisol we're going to use, and then it's also up to us to fill that reservoir back up. And with the shower nozzle, he said we can, turn on to a little mist and just let a little bit out, or we can full blast that shower nozzle. But the thing is, if we full blast it and we lose all that cortisol, then it's up to us to take a break and fill that reservoir back up.
Yeah. And so, what I've kind of been thinking about, and I think this is a theme that we've had throughout these conversations, is just giving ourselves permission to relax and to take some time for ourselves. I think it's really easy to feel selfish, right? I do have these obligations, I have my job and I have a family and I have this and I have these things that I have to do. And certainly those things are important, right? We all have the obligations that it's important to keep up. But I think getting away from that idea that it's selfish to take time for yourself, and to do these things and build these healthy lifestyle patterns. And I think it's so easy to play the when game. When I'm here, then I'll be better. Then I'll rest. Then I'll exercise. Then I'll, work on my emotional state and my beliefs and my relationship with myself and with other people. And then also, alternatively, like the when, like then I'll be happy. Like when I hit here, when I do this, like then I'll be happy. I think all those things is just recognizing that like it's important to build that solid base in the realm of training, in the realm of sleep, but also in just the general realm of life, right? And in our relationships, and in our stress patterns. And so I think that's one thing that I think it's very important to us. And I think that's a message that we've tried to get across, is that, like taking time to do these things will ultimately be, so beneficial in the long run that I think it can make up for a lot of the discomfort and difficulty that comes with adapting and making these changes.
Totally, and it all comes down to longevity. If you do these things, you can be an athlete for longer and feel better and have more energy for longer, instead of one of those athletes that just sprays that shower nozzle full out for 5, 6, 7 years, and then they're done and they're crippled. And here's a little tip. This is something that's been helpful for me.
Tips.
For somebody else. I've had a really hard time with just the phrase self-care, which that's what we're talking about, taking care of ourselves. I have a hard time with that because I've just seen so many people say self-care and they use it as an excuse to be lazy or to be selfish. Hashtags, and I see all over Pinterest and Instagram and hashtag self-care, and I just hated that term. So what I tell myself instead of self-care is I say self-maintenance. That helps me a lot. Another really awesome analogy I've heard is, say someone gives you an axe and tells you to cut down all these trees. You can just cut down all these trees without taking a second to stop and sharpen your axe, but then you're just wearing yourself out and it's going to take a lot longer versus if you stop and sharpen your axe for a minute and then get up and continue cutting down the trees.
Yeah, I like that. I know that's a good
right?
analogy. I can say words. Yeah, that's awesome.
So it's important to take care of yourself or to maintain yourself as a human being and as an athlete.
He gives a lot of examples about that in the book. These people that are keeping their axe sharp, and they're playing golf into their 90s. And they're active. I couldn't believe some of the examples he gave. This guy that he'd run the Boston Marathon 35 times.
Something like that.
Yeah,
It was.
but
I mean, I think if he started young, that wouldn't have been that impressive. But he started at 43.
Yeah.
and so he was into his upper 70s, and he'd run Boston every single time. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the process there, there is qualifying marks you have to hit. You have to run at a certain time, and for most people, those times are really hard. And so to be in your upper 70s and still being able to hit that shows he's done a lot of that self-maintenance and things to be able to have such a long career. And lots of times you'll see people hit that burnout and see kind of the opposite effect, when they are going over that line, when they're doing too much and not allowing their body to recover, and they're getting too comfortable with being in that fight or flight. Fight or flight zone.
Yeah. What's really cool about the story of this guy who ran Boston 3 times is he said he didn't plan it. It just happened. And I feel like what an awesome, what a perfect example of he's just taking care of his body and doing what he loves. And it sounds like, we didn't get a ton of details, but it sounds like he doesn't have a super strict regimen or routine. He just, running is just what he does. It's brushing your teeth or taking a shower. You just get up and run, and it just happened on accident. He just takes good care of himself. So it's just, they've become good habits, and I think that's where we should all aim to be.
Definitely. Oh goodness. It's funny because we keep coming back to that idea, right? This is what we talked about, and here's the science, and then let's come back to taking care of yourselves, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of been a theme through all of our through all the videos that we've done.
Well, in this whole book, that's kind of the theme of this book is slow down, take care of yourself, because that's the biggest mistake athletes make.
Yeah.
So.
And find time to have fun, find time to pursue your interests. This is a blast for all of us to come here and record, and we just get to socialize and laugh at funny toilet stories.
I knew it would come back.
Yes, it always comes back. Obviously, it can be a little bit harder to socialize right now with COVID and everything, and I know there's the anxieties and the difficulties that come along with that, but finding ways to let people around you, find ways to interact with them, whether it's through Skype or other things.
Or watching our videos.
Or watching videos,
we're
yes.
Good friends.
Yeah. And then I think making that care a two-way street. So being brave enough to tell other people when you need help and when you're feeling isolated, but then also taking time out of your day to seek out those around you and to help them and reach out to them and see if they're doing okay. I think that's something that's really only really important now in these times when it's probably a little bit more present in mind, but all the time. Being willing to reach out, but also being willing to take that help in return. I think that can go a long way in helping to manage a lot of the chronic stresses that we have in life.
I love that. I'm really grateful that you brought that up. Bartison didn't talk about that, but I feel like it's just as important as all these other things that we are socializing and spending time with people. So.
Well, it really kind of comes down to the premise of the book, living that primal lifestyle and focusing on like the things that we actually need. Because too many times, like these outside ideas or things we perceive that we might need to take care of kind of become too important. But if we're focusing on these things that are kind of like our roots, our relationships, our taking care of our bodies, making sure we're eating right, these things that are necessities, real necessities for ourselves, it really just simplifies your lives and allows you to be able to live that primal lifestyle that we've been talking about this whole way through. So,
I love it.
I love that. Just bring it all back to the basics every time. Just bring it back to the basics. It doesn't have to be complicated. So.
No. Way to bring it home.
Yeah.
So that's it for Primal Endurance. Thanks so much for joining us. This has been a blast. We'll keep you updated on the next book that we choose, and
stay tuned.
we hope that you'll join us for that. So.
Okay, and a quick shout out to our sponsors.
Yes. Thank you.
Facebook page Run for Fun. Shout out to Jimmy Thomas, his race series out in Tooele. Another shout out to the Wasatch Run Club.
Check us out on Facebook or our website, wasatchrunclub.com, or come run with us every Wednesday night.
Woohoo! And then one last shout out to the Utah Run Shop. Thanks, and thank you guys for watching.
A little late for that one.